Peace family, Michelle from supersfarm here. So in our last video, we mentioned that the number one thing we did to ensure success in our garden was to grow the foods that we ate. And I got to thinking about that, and I remember that was even a challenge for me. I mean, sure, make a list, keep track of what you're purchasing from the grocery store. Okay, but then what? The number one thing that I realized I was purchasing quite often, probably on a weekly basis, which was some form of bean, whether it be a green bean, a pea, or even the dried beans. So let's talk about it. So legumes, or the Leguminosae family, out here, because it is definitely a mouthful. The Leguminosae family encompasses the larger group of vegetables, such as lentils, peas, peanuts, and of course, what we're going to talk about today, beans. Did you know that vegetables in this family are the second most important food crop for all of mankind? I got that from a really cool book called Seed to Seed, which will help you in being able to not only grow your own vegetables, but harvest the seed and become completely a self-sustaining system. And I'll link that book down below. So beans are an annual crop, which means you will have to plant them on an annual basis. They won't come back year after year unless you have volunteer plants. And what that means is the plant will drop its seed, it will get buried or covered up, and inevitably it will come back the next season. It's not the original plant that's coming up, but that plant has dropped its seed and you get a volunteer plant. Now, the edible dry seed or the unripe pod, that is what you want to determine when you start to get your seed packets on which varieties you want to grow. So do you want a dry bean? These are also called shelling. Or do you want a green bean? These are also called snap. Now within both the dry and the green bean, you have either a bush variety or a pole variety. Your pole varieties can get up to 10 feet tall, whereas your bush varieties can get up to 20 inches wide. Now, because you're growing vertically with a pole variety, those plants can produce 2 to 3 times more than if the same variety was planted in a bush variety. So typically, you have a longer growing season with the pole variety, but those varieties do take longer to get to maturity. So if you're needing to grow food fast, you might consider either starting just a bush variety or both. The bush variety will have a shorter days to maturity, meaning it won't take as long for you to harvest those vegetables, but you won't have a long season with the bush varieties. Once they give you a good push, you'll harvest all of those beans from the plant, and then you'll drop another seed and plant another plant. Or you can time it so that when you start harvesting the plant, you already in another area, maybe in a greenhouse or another growing area, have less mature plants already started. So let's talk about common beans. common beans are going to be the more common, if you will, or frequently more accessible type bean. Now, in your dried common beans, you have things like black beans, kidney beans, navy, pinto, or turtle. Whereas in the green bean variety, you have varieties such as contender, dragon tongue, Blue Lake, and jade. So let's take a look at some seed packets to help you to be able to determine what it is you need to grow in your garden. All right, family, so I'm showing you one of the containers that I use to organize my seeds, and I'll link this down in the description box below where I got this container. But you can see that I have labeled here dry bush, and then I have green bush, and then I have dry pole and green pole. So this helps me to be able to organize my beans whenever it's time for planting season. I don't have to dig through the seed package to try to figure out what it is I need. So let's pull out one of the dry bush varieties. And here is a pinto bean, and it's from Fairy Morse. So now the main thing you want to look for when you're looking at your beans here is, like I said, is it a dry bean or is it a green bean? And you can see here at the top that it says it's a half runner bush dry bean. Okay. And some good information on your seed packets. And that's how I know that this is going to be a bush dry bean, which came out of my bush dry drawer here. Let's take a look at a green bush variety. So here I have some soya beans. I've actually never grown this, but when I look at my seed packet here, it says that it's grown just like green beans, and it can be harvested when pods are 2 to 3 inches long, or if they have completely dried. So I put this in the green bean bin, obviously because that's how I wanted to grow it, even though this could have gone in the dry. Okay, so let's take a look at the dry pole beans. Now, this bean here, this is the cowpea blue goose. This is the blue goose cowpea. I grew these beans, our first and second time growing beans, because I could harvest the green bean and I could harvest the dried pea to make just some good old pot of southern beans. Basically, you can't really go wrong growing the cowpea. Next we have the green pole. So within the green pole, I have striped bean here. What I have here, and I'll also place this as a thumbnail, is an assortment of the purple hull peas at different stages in their development. And I'm just gonna pop them open and show you what they look like. Don't let the name fool you. A purple hull pea is a bean, and if you want to go beyond the green bean stage and harvest the purple hull pea for the pea, which is actually a bean, then you want it to get that kind of yellow greenish hue on the inside. How do you know when that happens? You want to look at the hull, the outside of the bean. The more purple you have, the less green you have, the more rich, creamy goodness you're going to be able to harvest. I'd say plant it, play around with it, and see what you like. This is the stage that my family likes. Then when you get to the final stage here, of course you can't eat that, but you can harvest that dried out bean and plant for next season. Hope this. All right, so you figured out which varieties it is that you want to plant, and you go ahead and plant your seed. In a few days, you're gonna get a beautiful seedling to pop through the soil. And let me tell you, if it's your first time, this is worth capturing. This is a moment worth remembering. Your first successful seedling has had a birthday. Take a picture, post it on your social media. It's an amazing feeling. I will let my beans get about this size, and then I will transplant them into my larger garden. I plant them in rows, whether they're going to be bush or variety or a pole variety. I usually will give a little bit more spacing for the bush varieties because they're going to bush out, as the name implies. I would say about 2, maybe even 3 feet between each plant. You can definitely play around with this if you don't have a large growing space. You can plant them in a zigzag pattern so that they're not exactly side by side and they have a little bit more room to reach out. But just remember that when you plant your plants too close, they're going to be fighting for resources. So that may affect your ultimate harvest in the end. But just play around with it. You got your seedling up. Let's get to the next step. You go ahead and let your plants grow, and you will provide support for them if needed. You can. It would be a good idea if you're planting a pole variety to get your trellis in place when you plant, so you don't have to risk damaging your plant or fumbling around with the trellis at a later time. So you're just gonna let the plants grow. Once they begin to flower is when I will give just a fish emulsion right around the base of the plant, and that is pretty much all I'll do. So now your plant has grown up and it starts to display those beautiful, unique flowers. You may have white flowers, pink, purplish flowers. Whatever the variety you have will probably give you its own unique color of flower, but the bean flower is very unique. Now when you first start to harvest, you're gonna notice these tiny little beans. The first push give you these tiny little beans and you're like, what did I do? What am I gonna do with this? Go ahead and pick those beans. They're not gonna get much bigger in my experience. Go ahead and pick that first smaller push of beans, and then you'll notice that will trigger to the plant, okay, it's time to go. Let's harvest these beans. And it will start to push and push and push out more beans. Now, like I said, if you're growing a bush variety, when your plants start to dwindle down a little bit, then you want to go ahead and pull that plant and put in another one. If you're growing a pole variety, you want to consider what your trellis is looking like. If your trellis is getting full and you've got beans coming out of your ears, you might want to go ahead and extend that trellis or somehow contain that particular plant to your trellis, or you're going to have beans everywhere, which is a blessing. So now let's talk about pests. The pests that are going to most likely show up on your plants is gonna be the leaf-footed bug. It's kin to the squash bug, and I have a picture here that I'll show you. I'm gonna also show just a few pictures of some other not so beneficial pests that have visited my green beans in years past. But then there are also some beneficial insects that drop by. So you see, your green beans will play host to a variety of insects. I use this book here. This is the Texas Bug Book. Now, I don't know if they have this regional locations, but this book has really helped me in understanding, you know, what in the world is this on my plant? Because like I said, we were new to gardening. I had no idea that these things would even show up. So I'll put a link down in the description box for this book as well. I hope that this little video helped you in your gardening adventures. I will be doing additional videos on the most frequent vegetables that I grew in our first few seasons to ensure that I could provide the majority of the produce for our family. Thanks for watching. Peace.